You know, you're really pretty for a black girl. The words still echo in my ears from time to time. It wasn't the first time I heard it, nor would it be the last, but this time it hit differently. Pretty for a black girl. As though my blackness was somehow a barrier to being fully attractive, meaning that the only people who could be considered truly beautiful were white. I know this isn't what she meant, this troubled woman to whom I extended kindness by driving her home, but words matter, and the internalized privilege that whiteness provides betrayed her. Despite my being a college graduate with a full-time job and a car that I own, this woman who struggled to stay out of jail, let alone keep a job, thought she was better than me, simply because she's white. This is a very personal and real-life example of what we call a microaggression. Microaggressions are slights, insults, indignities, and denigrating messages that are directed toward an individual's marginalized identities. Microaggressions are based in a person's unconscious biases and stereotypes, which is what makes them so hard to correct, because most people who commit microaggressions think they're giving compliments, unaware of the hidden messages they're communicating. If we're unaware that what we're saying is harmful, even if we're trying to be positive, we're going to continue to cause harm and hurt. How many of the microaggressions on the slides that will come have you heard or even said? All of these examples, even though they're directed at different populations, have one thing in common. They are not purposefully malicious. Some are even meant as flattery, but they still cause great harm. We call this intent and impact. Intent is what a person means to convey, what they're trying to say. Impact is how those words land and the effect they have on the other person. Paying attention to a person's intent is really important. They may be learning and growing and trying to understand, but not have the proper language to get their point across. Or they may be using what they think is appropriate language, but because language is a living thing, words change, meanings change. And if we don't adapt to the changing language, we could end up saying something harmful that we don't mean. When I was younger and in between jobs, I ran errands and spent time with a 90-year-old woman in my hometown. Once she referred to me as colored. Usually when I say this, all the black folk in the room vocalize their displeasure at hearing the term. But I have to remind them that she was not denigrating me, because in her time, colored was the respectful term for a white person to use. We are so quick to jump to our own knowledge and understanding without considering the other person's frame of reference. Listening critically and thoughtfully to what others are saying helps us distill the words to their essence, to get to the meaning of what they're trying to say. And that is keenly important if we want to build a productive dialogue. Now, it is not my job to educate everyone. And there are days where I am just too tired from all the bridge building I've done to take on one more person. And that's okay too. But how I respond in that moment could make the difference between whether that person begins to move forward and grow, or whether they double down and further entrench themselves in ignorance. So if I choose to respond, I work hard to do so with kindness and with grace, even if I am not the one helping them along their journey. Now, granting a person grace when they make a mistake does not exempt them from accountability. If they make a mistake and you address it with them, but they keep making the same mistake over and over, it isn't a mistake anymore. It's a choice. And that may impact your choice of how you interact with them from that point forward. And while we don't want to make other people feel guilty due to their ignorance, neither should we feel guilty when we can't save everyone. Because the truth is some people don't want our help. They prefer to remain where they are, and trying to address intentional ignorance is a study in futility. So by the amount of time I've spent on intent, you're probably thinking that's the more important concept, right? However, nothing could be further from the truth. I focused on intent because that's the first place we as humans go when we've made a mistake. I didn't mean to, or I was just trying to. But when we've made a mistake, we have to shift our focus and get out of our feelings. It isn't about us anymore and what we've meant to do. Because if we focus on us, we're centering the people who caused harm, not the ones hurt. And all we're doing is deepening that hurt. This is about the other person and the harm that we have caused them, the impact that it has on them. And if we are going to be the allies and advocates that we say we are, we need to shine the spotlight on the right place, and that isn't on us. When we're talking about impact, we're talking about focusing on thinking empathetically. No one walks up to a person just hit by a baseball bat and says, "Stop complaining, that didn't really hurt," because we remember the times we ourselves have endured physical pain. We apply our sensitivity to their situation. So my question is, why we do this so easily with physical pain, but have a difficult time doing the same thing with emotional pain? We say things like, "toughen up," or "grow a thicker skin," when we see people harmed with words, when what they need is the same reaction we give those experiencing physical pain. Because the cumulative effects of negative impact are huge on both mental and physical health. Everything from feelings of exclusion rather than belonging, to declining job and classroom performance, from chronic anger and fatigue all the way to self-harm. We must put a greater emphasis on impact because the stakes are so much higher than just hurt feelings. And no matter what our intentions, good intent does not negate bad impact. So when we're informed that our impact didn't match our intent, we have to avoid saying things like, "it was just a joke," or "it didn't mean anything," because in that space, someone obviously felt that it did. Instead, we have to take ownership of our words and our actions, and rather than hone in on what we meant, focus on what we said or did and apologize. Apologies must be more than just words. Kevin Hancock, who is known for his philosophy of shared leadership and his sustainable business practices, said, quote, "Apologies aren't meant to change the past. They are meant to change the future," end quote. This is really powerful framing that helps to explain why the non-apology apologies are so meaningless. We've all heard them, phrases that start with, "I'm sorry," and then add if, that, but, or just, making the apology conditional and usually deflecting responsibility onto the person impacted. You know, things like, "I'm sorry that you were offended," or "I'm sorry if you feel that way." According to Dr. Natalie Martinek, the non-apology centers intent instead of impact or denies negative impact altogether and tries to provide an excuse for the speaker who did or said something wrong. To properly apologize, there has to be accountability. Highly acclaimed professor and scholar Dr. Lori Patton Davis gave us a wonderful template to use when apologizing. First, acknowledge our words and our actions. Second, apologize without condition. Third, recognize the harm that we caused. Fourth, commit to future action. And finally, be genuine and do the thing. Additionally, we need to recognize that no matter our intent, how sincere we are, how heartfelt our contrition, the person impacted is under no obligation to accept our apology. Expecting acceptance is once again centering ourselves and our intent, and the situation is about the impact on them, not on us. And that we're not forgiven is something we may have to deal with for the rest of our lives. I know it's a lot to take in, but we have to find a way to better communicate. Our society is so polarized, and if we don't find a way to reason together across difference, to move forward and become who we say we are, our institution, our community, our state, and our nation are threatened. We have to do better for the greater public good. You know, there is a less challenging way to deal with all of this. Being mindful of what we say and putting careful thought into what we verbally share before we share it, because words matter. Thank you.